All right, welcome everyone to the Pickens County Board of County Commissioners work session on Tuesday, March 4th. We are kicking off our work session with one of our lovely quarterly meetings with the Open Space and Trails Board. And thank you all for coming and joining us today. So I will go ahead and turn it over to Gary Tenenbaum, who is our Open Space and Trails Director, to start us off on a discussion about the historic Glacier House renovation.
All right. And I'm Gary Tenenbaum. I'm the Director of Pickens County Open Space and Trails, and with me is Paul Folsinger, who is the Conservation and Easement and Agriculture Manager for Open Space and Trails. And if we can get Jessie on the line, she's in Europe right now. But let's see if we find her. But no, otherwise we today are bringing the glacier renovation. So I'll go a little bit into history. Glacier was an incredible project. We just did 3 meadows with Eagle County, but Glacier was the original property where we worked with Eagle County to acquire, I kind of forget how many acres out there, but it was probably about 350 acres on Hooksborough Road. It's incredible agricultural property, it's a historic property, and it's also got great trails to the crown. And one of the pieces we've been trying to solve is what to do with the historic house. That's originally Frida and Fred Glacier's home. I think it was constructed in the early 1900s. And we have been working to try to get a state historic grant to help us restore that house to be used for housing for both agriculture and staff. We've been working on designs for that house for about a year and a half now. And with the design, the direction we got from both boards was to design it as flexible as possible, but also with as much housing as possible. And so we're at that point. We budgeted in 2025 to actually do the restoration. We're ready to do the restoration. We applied for the second time for the state historic grant, and we did not get that. And so staff feels that, you know, this is obviously not a huge priority for the state. There are other pieces on this property that might qualify. There's an original homestead house, there's a barn, there's other pieces that we could go for in the future. But before construction prices continue to go up and everything else, we have the money in the budget to do it. But today, the first question will be, is if the Open Space Board and the BoCC give a thumbs up to just spending all the money without getting a $250,000 reimbursement. And then the second piece, and I'll let these guys explain it, is we have a potential opportunity in a place that has a kind of a garagey, like, workshop piece to build a new one that's not historic. So this would just be building a new kind of barn, kind of workspace in there. And one of the questions will be is, could we include an affordable housing unit on that? This is all in Eagle County, so it's not under our land use code, it's Eagle County's land use code. But the reason why we're asking the second question is to get a thumbs up from both boards to explore it, because there's potential issues with it, with well and septic and other things that we'll have to explore. And so, you know, so those are the two questions today. One, yes to just doing the restoration of the house and foregoing the $250,000 state grant. And the second question will be either a thumbs up or thumbs down to look at adding an affordable housing unit onto a potential new barn. So with that, let me
just jump in real quick. So
Sure.
on process, we will all have a conversation together. We'll let them present. We'll ask questions. We'll have discussion among ourselves. And for the benefit, Jeffrey, this is your first joint meeting with us. We usually take we let the Open Space Board decide on their recommendation to the board, and then we deliberate based on that. Okay?
Perfect.
Thank you.
Thank you for that.
Yep.
So with that, oh, Jesse's there.
We're
Hi,
gonna-
Jesse.
Hey, Jesse.
We're gonna go to Jesse first.
Where's Jesse?
I think she's in Switzerland.
Alright,
Is this
I've
a
got it
final?
off mute.
Nice. Is this a final okay?
Well, this will be direction from both boards, and then I imagine it comes back for an appropriation.
No, not,
Okay.
well,
This is a
the
budget
first piece,
supplemental.
no, it's not. The
Remember.
first
I can
piece
explain
is,
that, or Gary can.
the first piece is just thumbs up. We have it budgeted for the full amount. We're just not gonna get a reimbursement. So I want, make sure everyone's okay with that. And so that's you just have to give me a thumbs up and thumbs down. The second one is, should we explore should we explore the possibility of adding an affordable housing? That will come back for budget and approval, but I don't want to spend any money exploring it if you guys aren't interested in looking at it.
I
Great.
jumped up too quickly.
No, that's great. Does that
No
answer your
worries.
question, Greg?
Yeah.
Good? Okay. Yep. Thank you.
All right, Jesse,
Well,
Paul.
thanks, Gary. I think you covered most of the points that I was gonna hit on.
Here's our acreage.
I can kind of just walk everybody through the site plan. I pulled together some exhibits that we've used in the past. And we've been working really closely with Susanna Reed. Just a little bit of background or some to kind of draw a picture in everybody's mind. This is the historic Glacier House. It has 2 additions that were put on. A bathroom with plumbing is the only bathroom that was serving the house, was one of those additions, and the other was a additional bedroom on the other side of the house. And as you can see, kind of the house is deteriorating pretty quickly. It's in urgent need of a new roof, and that's kind of one of the reasons that staff wants to proceed as quickly as we can on moving this project forward, both to maintain what we can from the existing bones of the house, which are good, but not letting it go into further disrepair, and then, of course, fulfilling the urgent housing needs of our department and our lessees who are stewarding this land, are reasons that we feel that this project should move forward. These are just some other images. These are back in 2017. And then just kind of the general kind of plan view of what kind of buildings are already on the site. This is that big historic barn, the newer non-historic metal barn. This one is also the non-historic kind of yellow off-white garage that's in pretty poor condition and could be replaced with the barn dominium that Gary was referencing, which is a new term to me, but I kind of like it. So a lofted barn. And then here's the historic house, which could have, I'll show you on the next page, another auxiliary room added on kind of to the east of the main historic house, in addition to another little addition, replacing kind of that, the square footage from those older additions into a new way, or kind of repurposing that square footage in a better construction, because those are not built on quality foundations and they're deteriorating fast. So that kind of rough plan would look like this. This is kind of that addition, as well as kind of replacing this older addition. And then that kind of additional little room on the back could function as a kind of lock-off bedroom unit for seasonal staff. You know, we're kind of just building in the flexibility of what that might look like and making sure that it all flies under the land use code of Eagle County. So that's kind of part of the background on the potential improvements. And yeah, Gary, I think you covered a lot more of the meat of the presentation that I was going to get into, but I think Paul and I are both available to ask any questions. Paul, if you want to jump in and cover anything that I didn't, go for it.
Yeah, thanks, Jesse. Yeah, one of the things that I think we have to keep in mind is that we have a conservation easement on Glacier, both of the parcels. So when we think about Glacier, if you look at the map Jesse has up, you think about it as you can think about it as 2 separate parcels that we purchased with the help of Eagle County. One is the Glacier Ranch there. The first one was the Red Ridge Ranch. Both of these parcels have a conservation easement over them, which are held by Eagle County. And we did have restrictions on those conservation easements regarding residential square footage development, both new and existing. So in the Glacier Ranch, we preserved all of the existing square footage, but we built in 2,000 square feet of additional new residential square footage that we could apply sometime in the future. And now, 10 years later, we're ready to at least use some of that to expand the house to make it more usable for multiple people. That piece that was added to the north of the structure, it's actually below the house when you go down to that picture. It's the picture of what we're proposing. It only adds another, I think, 600 square feet. So when we talk about the barn dominium, we do have some square footage there, about 1,400 square feet, which is a decent size for an affordable housing unit or something like that. So we're, like we said before, we're trying to build in the most flexibility we can, keeping in mind that this is an active agricultural property. We have livestock on the property. We're going to have vegetable producers out there. As you saw at your most recent regular meeting, we have those leases all lined up. And so having some ability to have somebody on site, whether it's staff or an agricultural lessee, is going to be key to making that a sustainable operation. So we do have some constraints. Eagle County has been really nice to work with. They are helping in every way they can, getting us meetings with their planning department and supporting financially in whatever way they can, which is still a question mark, but they're trying to do everything they can because it's a priority for them as well. But any questions? you
Okay,
guys
let's
have
see.
would
Why
be
don't we
fine.
go, we'll go counterclockwise, starting with Michael Kinsley. Go ahead.
And what's the relationship between this barn dominium and the existing ugly metal building?
Well, that's a footprint that we could use to create a usable agricultural structure, but then also have some residential attached to it.
So you're talking about tearing down the ugly metal building and putting up a different barn with a housing unit in it?
Yes.
Terrific.
Yeah.
Great
That would be
idea.
after we get the house situated.
Great idea. Thank
And
you.
you'll see that. All I want is the thumbs up to add.
Yeah.
You're gonna see that in a budget thing. You don't have to make a decision on exactly what it's gonna look like or
Understand.
exactly what it's gonna cost.
Yeah.
But
Also add, I know you've brought up preserving that old barn. We are continuing to
The big
the big one
funky
that
one that looks like it's coming down.
yeah, it's got a nice little bow in the roof there. Now
Makes
that,
them much better paintings than a straight one.
well, we're pursuing. We're going back to History Colorado to hopefully get a grant to help with that barn. Now that we hopefully will move on from trying to get them to put money into the house, which will certainly preserve the historic elements of that house that's there, but they're just not ready to put money into it. And we desperately need to get housing, and costs are going up every single year.
well, and the house is
Yeah.
starting to fall down.
Yeah.
I mean, honestly.
Yeah.
It's time.
We Band-Aided it enough, but the roof is not good, the roof structure is not good, and it's, so it's time to do something, and I just feel like for the 250 out of the amount of money that we are gonna spend on this house anyway, it seems kinda, why wait a whole nother year just to go get that 250, where
It's not
that barn
guaranteed.
is more, the problem with the house is it's got additions to it, and we're adding things to it, so it's not, and this will actually make it easier. As I said in the memo, it'll actually make it easier to do, because we can do all the renovations at once, not just exterior, then interior, we'll do it all at once.
Good.
Where the barn, it is a historic structure, so if we just get the money for that, we can start getting that going, so.
Yeah, thank you for making that point. I wanted to make sure that we said that, Gary.
Thank you. Go ahead, Howie.
Couple of questions, Paul. I think Gary just explained why we haven't been successful with State Historic Preservation Fund, is because the building itself has too many additions to it. It's not uniquely historic because of those additions.
Well, we went last year for that historic grant, and we got those comments that, hey, you shouldn't include these pieces. We made all those changes. We came back with better numbers that they requested, and we still didn't get the grant. And at that point, we realized, this funding isn't guaranteed. So it's probably better for us to move on, get this done. But we've been trying.
So
a
we
couple years now.
we acquired the property in 2015, approximately.
Yeah, 2014.
I remember we did a site visit about 6 years ago, it seemed like. And I think there was concern whether the building would still had enough structural integrity to make it for the next 10 years. So I think, personally, I think we need to take on the responsibility of ownership and refurbish the building, make it structurally sound and appropriate renovation. Question, is the outcome going to be an L-shaped building with that metal, with the demolition of the building just to its northeast, the metal barn?
Well,
I'm
if-
confused about that.
Jesse, can you bring that picture of the proposed? It's really going to be the house as it is now with that addition to that's actually the north of the building, but that
This
Yep.
becomes a new part,
becomes an addition. Yep.
new foundation, new infrastructure.
Yes, and it's also going to serve as a place where people can access a bathroom without going into somebody else's residence. It's going to serve as what it says there, an assembly room. It can have multiple functions with this configuration. It also creates a better entryway for what we're doing with the existing house, which is creating two separate units, one upstairs, one downstairs. So it does a lot for us on the property, and it, like we said, creates a lot of flexibility for, whether that's going to be maybe some school groups are coming in and they need a space to have some sort of class, and everybody needs a bathroom if there's a bunch of farm workers out there. So we're solving a lot of potential problems with this.
All right, I'll keep going around the table and then we'll go online. Jeffrey, any questions right now?
Any foundation issues in the existing structure? You harped on about the roof.
Jesse can answer that one.
I believe there are certainly some foundation issues, and that's the main reason that we, as staff under Susanna's recommendation, want to remove those additions to the historic structure that were kind of put on in decades later, because they aren't on solid foundations. And so to restore them would be kind of, I think, unnecessarily expensive and don't contribute to the historic quality of the building for the time period that is of note. And so that's why we're kind of proposing to remove and replace them, because their foundations are not worth restoring, or you basically have to rebuild, is my understanding. And I'm not an architect, but I think the foundation of the main house is better, but we'll still need some repairs for sure. Mm-hmm. And we've had an engineer out of Carbondale has been looking at this, and that's all included in our cost estimates and stuff so far.
All right, Graham?
I think this is really an exciting opportunity, because it's a pretty neat old house, and it's very representative of what used to be here. But also, it's a cluster of buildings, and a cluster of buildings just adds value, because it really helps you to envision what life was like there. And then beyond that, we're putting farmers in the beds. And so it's like, most historic buildings don't get to remain with their original use, and this one is. So, I mean, putting farmers in the beds of a historic house surrounded by fields, I think is really a great project. One question I have is that the exterior colors are pretty distinctive. I'm not sure how historic they are, but they got a lot of punch to them, and I'm wondering if you plan to keep those colors.
I have no comment on that.
Go ahead, Paul. I don't think that that's
Jesse.
a detail that's necessarily been discussed. I know I've been to the historic conferences in Boulder that have kind of restored some of these historic houses and painted them new colors and kind of added new life, and can be a cool way to do it, or we can stick with the current color scheme. I don't know that we've made those decisions yet, or we certainly haven't.
Well, we haven't made a decision to change it, so
Yeah.
that's one of those things where when we looked at the brick and all that, once the contractor gets on board, we can see what the, you know, the condition of the paint and everything else is, and the brick. And if we want to keep it, we can keep it. And if the board would like us to keep that color, I'm sure we would be happy to do it.
Yeah,
But we haven't made a decision to change it.
I think we'd like to be in on that decision.
Okay, yeah, we'll do that.
Because it's so important
Yeah.
to the building.
You got it.
So anyway, I'm all in favor of the project. In terms of the new project, I think my own opinion is that we ought to move ahead with the feasibility study. I think the first thing to do, though, is to establish what the need for that is. In other words, not get ahead of ourselves with design ideas and stuff until we know what kind of agricultural space there might be and what type of person and how big a unit might be in there, and you know what we architects call a building program. You know, how is this thing going to be used? And I think we need to establish those parameters pretty well, and I think clear them with the board before, you know, we go ahead.
Oh, yeah. Well, we'll come back with a design and kind of cost and kind of a program of what we see. Here's the unit, here's the size of the unit, here's the size of the workspace, here's the size of the barn, and this is what we're potentially gonna use it for. And we'll come back with that. I don't wanna go too much further, and if you guys don't wanna at least add a unit on there, because it'll change what the barn would be if we don't add a unit.
But how is that agricultural space used? Who's going to use
Right,
it? What are they
that'll
using
be
it
the
for?
barn piece, but
Establishing
yeah.
that need, I think, is important.
Yeah.
That's all I'm saying.
Thank you. I'll go to Wayne and then Francie.
Okay, I just have a couple of clarification questions, I guess. Microphone. The old house is on the historic register currently?
Yes.
yes.
Yes, okay. And the
question.
the funding, we've already approved the funding in anticipation of getting the grant to help
Yep.
offset. So it's just basically kicking in another $250,000 to get that done.
Correct.
Yeah, I'm also supportive. I think having farmers live on the property they're working is hugely important, and the opportunities for flexibility with the design you've come up with, I think, are great. And I would also support the look into the what's
Barn dominium.
which I also had never heard of before.
I was worried when Jesse put that in the memo, because
Just-
it'll take on a life of its own,
Yeah,
but
it really
get on
will.
board.
probably.
I know, but anyway.
It's either crazy cows or
Right.
some kind of-
So yeah, I'm supportive of both,
Okay.
moving forward both.
Thank you. All right, Francie.
I love this project. It's everything I didn't like about the Cozy Point RV proposal. It's beautiful for one thing, and it's using old buildings, and it's everything I like. It fits perfectly with Pitkin County, and I thoroughly approve. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Francie. Greg, do you want to weigh in? Or have any questions?
I'm good, thank you. I like what I see.
Okay, well, I'll let Howie, if you want to just re-articulate your board's direction and.
I think our board summarizes. Oh.
Red light on.
Red light on. I hear the consensus on the board to approve to self-fund the renovation of the Glacier property, which includes the addition of the assembly room building off to the northeast corner.
Correct. And we will get at least $350,000 from Eagle County, and we're asking for more to offset this grant.
So to that point, what do you estimate our budget line item is going to end up with at this phase?
Well, right now, we're looking at 1.3, about like that number that was in the thing. What we're looking at about the county's fund would be 1.3.
And does that include, does that include the 350 from, so the total cost is $1,650,000?
Well, it's a million, yeah. It's
Okay.
right there.
All right, because this will be a number the public's going to look at, and I think we can defend it very well, but we should be.
And it still, and totally fits one of the pieces, you guys, the Open Space Board created a historic policy on historic renovations to kind of guide the program. This still fits under our 2% of using the overall fund. We are not even close to that up until even this point in 2025. So we're in a good space with the historic policy.
And the board has consensus to explore the possibility of additional affordable housing up to 2,000 square feet. Is that what we're?
Whatever the balance is, we'll probably have about 1,200 to 1,400 square feet to deal with.
You'll come back to us with a recommendation as to configuration and a tentative cost.
And uses.
And uses.
And the needs and everything else. As Graham knows, there's not going to be an agricultural producer out there that says they don't need extra space, considering the fact that we now have 4 agricultural lessees on this property. So I'll be surprised if we don't come up with it, but we'll explore it and show what it could be, because each building is different. And even if we restore the barn and actually can start using it, you know, we're going to put that into that conversation too.
Because the barn restoration cost and the new affordable housing costs will
They're
be
future.
Excuse me?
Those are going to be future.
Right, those would be a new cost line item.
Yeah.
All right, okay. So that's my summary.
Wait, Wayne
Thank
has
you,
questions.
and Wayne.
I just have one other question. And if we end up moving forward with the barn dominium, that won't really count towards our 2% historic.
No.
Because that's not a historic structure.
No, that will be totally 100% created using county funds for capital improvements.
Right, gotcha.
Michael.
At some point, please check back with us when you start deciding the basis upon which the residents will reside there.
Okay.
Okay, yes, Graham.
Just in terms of timing, have we got construction drawings and permitting? Where are we at, and when do you think the construction could begin?
Jesse?
Yeah, we're scheduling our pre-app meeting with the Eagle County Building Department, and we have permit level drawings that Suzanne is finishing up, and then we'll be subsequently putting it out to bid contingent on approvals, and so we're hoping to get started on this in the early summer.
Oh, good.
Great.
All right, I'll check in with the BoCC. You've heard the recommendation of the OST board on both the additions and the self-funding of it, as well as the exploration of the barn dominium. Is there any objections?
No objection.
Okay, thank you all for your thoughtful work.
Great. Thank you,
Good job,
guys.
Jesse.
That was
Yeah.
easy.
Thank you all.
I thought that was easy. That's why I only put it on for half an hour.
Yeah, and I don't believe we have any other business today with open space and trails. You may need to adjourn your meeting, and we're gonna keep going.
Move adjourned.
Congratulations on your additional leases.
All right,
as
well,
Thanks.
lovely to
Yes,
spend the
that
morning
was-
with you guys.
It's cool to see
Enjoy
how
the
much
snow.
demand we're starting to get for this.
Yeah, likewise.
We always want to snow on a meeting day.
I know,
Just our
right? I know.
discipline.
Okay, so I'll invite Michael Port. I'll invite you up if you want to start getting set up, and then we'll clear the room and quiet down, and then we'll move on to our discussion.
There you go.
Yeah, I know. Now we gotta get to work on this.
I have to review that. We adjust our schedule.
I think it's so important.
John, do you want to teach papers? So.
Oh, is that?
I missed that.
He didn't
Yeah, he did just gonna join the Zoom and share.
Okay. I'll promote you.
Essay from Tocqueville about civil associations in book 2.
All right, so we are still in our work session.
Oh, it's cold in here, huh?
It is.
Wow.
And our next item for discussion is the Pickens County Regional Comprehensive Greenhouse Gas Report from 2023. And Michael, remind me exactly of your title.
Climate Action Analyst.
Thank you.
Well, you're
I thought we weren't doing that climate stuff anymore.
Well, you know, we're behind the times in here in Pickens County.
We're trying to offset all of your buildings that you guys are doing. Thank you, Michael.
Okay, looks like we have a few folks who need to be promoted. And Michael, whenever you want to
Ready to go?
share your screen or anything, please. Chilly in here. Yeah. Let me also introduce, we have Kara Silbernagel, our Deputy County Manager, who you're presenting with Michael.
I'm here to support his question.
Okay.
And I believe Ashley is on as well.
Yes. Hi.
Hey, good afternoon. So, Michael Port, Climate Action Analyst from our Resiliency Department. Thanks for having me today. I'm here to present our Pickens County Region Comprehensive Greenhouse Gas Emissions Report for the year 2023. I'll come right out and say, yes, that is not a typo. We're looking at 2023 for the study. I know it's 2025, but we started this project midway through last year, doing data collection to pull it together and produce the report. So it's a bit of a lengthy project, but it provides really good insights for us and is the best way that we have to assess our community-wide emissions. This presentation is just intended for information. There's no action you all need to take today, but it tees up some other climate action related presentations that we're going to bring you later this month. And yeah, looking forward to that in the coming weeks. For today's agenda, I want to start off just by providing some background about why we do the report and how we put it together. Next, move on to the key findings and takeaways that we had for regional emissions. Then moving into interpreting those findings for Pickens County, for our organization specifically, what does this mean and how we should be looking at the report. And then lastly, some next steps. What is the GHG report? It's a combination of a greenhouse gas inventory that looks at the main sources of emissions within the county or within our region, and includes some narrative interpretation and description of the trends that we're seeing. This is the main method that we have to track progress towards our adopted greenhouse gas reduction goal, which is to reduce emissions 90% from 2019 levels by 2050. The project or the report estimates community-wide emissions for one calendar year, and the way that we define the region and the community for this report is the Pickens County region includes all of our municipalities plus the parts of Basalt that are in Eagle County. So we look at the total emissions for the region, and then we also get a breakout of the emissions for each jurisdiction. We have done this every 3 years, going back to 2014, and we generally compare the current year's report to the previous and see what changes we found with emissions. We also use this as an opportunity to partner with municipalities. We previously relied on external partners such as CORE to produce the report, but with our new staff capacity, we brought the project in-house. We applied for a grant from DOLA that supported the project, and we brought along our municipalities in this project to get them the GHG data that they rely on as well. And one other note is that you may hear about greenhouse gases from other projects or other reports. With Vision 2050, we talk about GHGs really specifically for the building sector. But this report is sort of the highest level greenhouse gas data that we look at for the county and the region. What we measure are the primary sectors of emissions. Historically, we've looked at buildings, transportation, and waste as the main sectors. In this 2023 report, we actually added a couple new sectors with new data that we have available. The way that we get at emissions is through estimates. There may be a misconception that we are like on the ground monitoring GHG emissions, measuring emissions coming out of a tailpipe, but the way that we produce these estimates is by looking at activity data. So they're basically indicators of activity occurring in the county or in the region, and then we make assumptions about how much carbon emissions are being produced based on those activities. So I'll describe each of these. For buildings, we primarily look at electric and gas utility data. So we reach out to the utilities, collect the total kilowatt hours of energy consumed in the region and within each jurisdiction, as well as to Black Hills, the therms or the amount of natural gas being consumed. And then we multiply those by carbon emissions factors, which helps us estimate emissions. For transportation, we look at both on-road transportation, which is the term for vehicle emissions. We base that off of a vehicle miles traveled analysis. And in this 2023 report, we actually got access to a new data set for VMT, which helped us improve the quality of that estimate for vehicle emissions. And then we also look at aviation-related emissions, and the airport supplies us with fuel consumption data from directly fuel consumed at the airport, and then produce an emissions estimate for aviation. For the waste sector, it is based on the amount of waste going into the landfill, and we just reach out directly to the Solid Waste Center for that, as well as a small amount of emissions related to wastewater treatment. And then the new sources that we added were the Coal Basin mine fugitive emissions. So commissioners received a presentation back in the fall about that project and the data being collected by Core and their partners to quantify the methane that's been passively leaking from Coal Basin. And then also we added the agriculture, forestry, and other land use net carbon. So that is basically carbon being stored, but also emitted by forests and public lands within the county, since that's such a huge part of our lands here. Jumping to the key takeaways, and then I'll describe these in more detail as we go through the presentation. But the headline really is that total emissions increased by 22% from 2019. That is partially due to some of those new data sources that we had that we did not include in previous inventories, but it also is based on, we saw building energy consumption go up. We saw these indicators go up that generate emissions, similar to the presentation that you received about economic intensity a few weeks back. I think this is further support showing that we're seeing an increase in activity in the region. A great finding was that cleaner electricity led to a 2% decrease in building emissions. That is related to Holy Cross and Aspen Electric having really clean electricity that they supply to the grid and working towards fully renewable sources by 2030. But we saw transportation and waste emissions increase. Again, those three are kind of the normal bread and butter sectors of emissions that we have been measuring. And then interpreting this a little bit and looking ahead is that we're expecting building emissions to continue to go down, especially as Holy Cross works towards 100% clean electricity and as our building and land use codes that we've been working on start to take effect. We would expect to see building emissions go down, but that means that waste and transportation emissions are going to become more important. They're going to take up a bigger share of our total emissions and those problems or those sources of emissions are more complex and they're dependent on regional dynamics. So the transportation emissions in Pickens County region are not occurring in a vacuum. There's, transportation patterns are occurring outside of the control of the county or any one jurisdiction. This slide starts to get at that a little bit. So this is the overall emissions by sector comparing 2019 to 2023. What on the left-hand side is 2019, and what we saw during that inventory year is that the blue section and yellow are both commercial and residential buildings. That was about 60% of our total emissions. Transportation was about 30%, and solid waste was 10%. In the 2023 inventory or report, we're starting to see building emissions become a smaller percentage of the total share of emissions. So it was less than 50% of emissions in 2023. We did see transportation take up a larger percentage, and that orange slice there is primarily the coal basin emissions, which eats into some of the other sectors. But in any case, we expect to see buildings take up a smaller and smaller slices of the pie chart here. Now I want to dive into providing just a high-level kind of summary of each of the sectors that we looked at and some of the interesting findings. So for buildings, this table shows the comparison of 2019 to 2023 for both commercial and residential electricity, natural gas, and propane related emissions. First note is that we have asterisks there for propane. Because they're such a small share of the total emissions and the data is not as reliable as it is from electric and gas utilities, we don't pay a ton of attention to it. We really pay attention to the utility data as the best indicators for us. But what was interesting is we saw both natural gas and electricity consumption increase from 2019 to 2023, but that had was shown differently based on the effects on our emissions. So we had increases in natural gas emissions, but those were outweighed by the reductions in emissions from electricity. So even though we consumed more kilowatt hours because the electricity was cleaner in 2023 than 2019, we saw an overall reduction of 2% in our building-related emissions. For transportation, again, breaking down the vehicle-related emissions and aviation-related emissions. In the vehicles space, I mentioned that we got access to a new VMT data set that provided better quality estimate of vehicle traffic and transportation patterns in the region. In the 2019 report, that was reliant on a 2017 cell phone data set. So in the 2023, we used a 2023 data set. So you can imagine that both the quality of the data and the applicability of, we use 2023 data for 2023, improved this estimate. And when we apply that new data set, we could also do that to apply it to 2019. We saw a 6% increase in vehicle-related emissions. Using the old model to the new model, there was a much bigger difference, but we did an apples-to-apples comparison, providing that 6%. For aviation, there was a 22% increase in emissions. Want to provide a caveat that is another area where we don't really have direct control over the amount of fuel being consumed. We're working on the SAF project to try and get at that. And also in the pie chart here, aviation is still only about 1/3 of our total transportation emissions. So while it is important, the vehicle emissions are much larger share and something that we could potentially focus on. For waste, this includes landfill waste, the emissions produced through the composting process, which is less than if the material would have gone into the landfill, but it still does produce some emissions, and then the wastewater treatment process. For solid waste, which combines compost and landfill waste, there was a 14% increase in emissions, so that's just resultant from larger amounts of landfilled and composted waste being handled from 2019 to 2023. And then we saw a 12% decrease in wastewater. Coal Basin is that new source that we added to the report. This image is from that presentation that you saw where Core and their partner Delta Brick and Climate Company are taking some direct measurements of the methane that is passively leaking out of Coal Basin. And they calculated that there's about 2,900 metric tons of methane seeping out per year. That could vary from year to year depending on conditions, but in 2023 that accounted for 9% of total regional emissions, which is a really significant number. Because this new data was available, the method that we use, or the protocol that we use to produce the report, essentially requires us to include it, and I think it is also something that we should include because it's becoming a bigger and bigger priority for sort of the climate space, and we're learning more about where methane is occurring, especially because it's a much more potent greenhouse gas than carbon. And again, just to reiterate, this was not available the last time we did the report, so we have this big jump in percentage of emissions. A lot of that is attributed to this new data source. And lastly, this is the agriculture, forestry, and other land use analysis. This does not affect our total emissions number that we report. This doesn't give us a pass to generate more emissions, but what this analysis showed was that the forest in Pickens County is absorbing more carbon than it is producing. So we have a net reduction of carbon being sequestered compared to the emissions that are occurring. So again, that was like a new data source that we wanted to include to provide a more comprehensive accounting of what's going on with carbon emissions in the county, and it's something that we'll continue to keep an eye on.
Can I repeat what I think I heard?
Yep.
That these sources are sequestering more than they're producing.
Correct.
Not in some. They're not sequestering all of our emissions.
Correct.
In a greater amount than we're producing. Okay.
Correct. Okay, so I'm going to flash.
Looks like Francie has a question. Go ahead, Francie. Yeah.
Thanks, Kelly. And so you're mentioning the forests, but did you do a separate analysis for the agriculture, whether it's mitigating more than it's using?
There was not a specific analysis for agriculture. We don't have, this is in like, where it's really applicable is for highly agricultural like jurisdictions where there's a lot of mass amounts of like cattle and livestock that's producing emissions. Ours was really primarily focused on the forest and changes in like forest cover during the time period.
Okay, because grasses also absorb a lot of carbon. Just saying, there's a lot of land that is agricultural that's grass, and grass is a really good absorber of carbon.
Yes. Good point. Thank you. All right, so I'll show these slides again, but just as a moment to pause and tell you that I just gave you kind of the highlights of the main sectors of emissions. we're talking about the region as a whole, but now I want to transition to talk more about Pitkin County specifically and, our emissions over time and looking ahead.
If we were
before I-
visually presenting this, the pie on the right would be bigger. Is that right?
Correct. Yes.
So our pie is getting bigger, but it's getting a little more evenly distributed, which I don't know if that's good. It's just an observation.
Yeah. Are there any other questions before I move on to that next? Jeffrey has been writing
Greg
furiously
has
over
his
there.
hand up. Go ahead, Greg.
Yeah, thanks, Michael. This is all fascinating stuff. I'm having trouble processing. We've changed the data sets, yet we're comparing years to previous years. And the conclusion is that we're at 22% more carbon emissions in the period between 2019 and 2023. I'm having trouble understanding what that means. Had we been including all those other data sets earlier, would the difference be less? Or is this pointing to an indication that we've actually grown our carbon emissions realistically by 22%? Thanks.
Yeah, that's a good question. So this table, so it's really difficult to backtrack all the way to 2014. It's really time-intensive process and doesn't, we could do that as much as we want, but just looking at 2019 to 2023, this adjusts for, if we eliminated Coal Basin in this report, if we had chosen not to include it, but we still use this better transportation vehicle data, we still saw a 5% increase in emissions from 2019 to 2023. So we still saw building energy go up, we still saw solid waste go up, fuel consumed at the airport go up. So this table corrects a little bit for that, just comparing back to 2019. So I can't say anything about previous years, but the increase would not be as great had we not chosen to include Coal Basin.
Thank you. This is really helpful. I think using the 22% number then, seems kind of, throwing us off. If it's not, is it not as accurate, or is it just seems like going up by 5% is a lot easier to swallow, but I want to make sure we're looking at the accurate numbers. But I want to thank you for this. And I also want to say I'm gratified that we are pushing toward electrification. It seems to be showing fruit, and electrification of vehicles will also be making a difference as well. So our SAF efforts to create a SAF plant are right in line, as are our efforts to make the solid waste center more efficient. So anyway, it feels to me like we're on the right track, but we aren't doing anywhere near enough. Thanks.
And maybe one piece I would add as you think about how the story that's being told is what is really great work that Michael and the team did is I would also, that 6%, it's a 6% increase from 2019 if we use the new VMT. So I think the important narrative is also, you could look at it as the 2019 number is somewhat undercounted because of that VMT methodology. So, you can tell the story a few different ways, but I think it's important to capture that 2019 is a little bit of an undercount by using this new updated VMT methodology. And now we've got a really strong methodology because of the work that they've done that we can be tracking that moving forward.
Thank you. If I could, Kelly, thanks, Kara. My concern is that this is just starting to confuse people more. Maybe it's just me. So I'm looking forward to, if this is the baseline going forward, I'm sure things will change again and the data sets will change again. But I think it's really important to have the clearest, information we can. And at this point, I'm feeling a little bit wobbly about it because, we've got so many caveats and changes of data sets, which are are the numbers so skewed we shouldn't be comparing to previous years?
Greg, you're not alone in feeling wobbly. We've been tracking GHG emissions for a lot longer than most counties. And along with that, the protocols that we follow to try and be consistent are changing all the time. So unfortunately, the field of study of greenhouse gas emissions is not at a super sturdy or stable place where we can't guarantee no changes in the future. But I do think now adding in the coal basin is a great baseline as opposed to leaving it out, because we're more protocol compliant, which is important in our little nerdy climate world. But mostly I think the transportation, the way we collected the transportation data, I think is some of the most up-to-date high technology that there is. And so I'm hopeful that that won't change as drastically in coming years. And then the other sectors have less wiggle room for change because we're collecting actual data and we're making fewer assumptions. So I won't tell you that it'll never change again in 3 years, but we're hopeful that this is we are recommending this is our new baseline because it's a way we have a lot more confidence in this protocol and the data that we collected. So hopefully you won't see as much wobble next time.
Well, I appreciate that, and I have to say, congratulations on this, and it is improving, and I look forward to seeing it. So it is helpful. So thank you. I don't want to discourage anybody, but it's very helpful.
Did you have anything you want to add right now? Go ahead, Jeffrey.
Are you going to get to more of the per capita data? So
Actually, no, I'm not covering that in this presentation. I didn't have a slide for that.
Yeah, I found that was probably the most fascinating slide in your in the AIS, and I thought the takeaway, and I'd just love for you to unpack where you believe, why are we double state average on per capita? So that to me was the forgetting apples to apples, because I think a lot of this conversation so far has been adjustments in data. I'm fascinated by that. So if you could unpack a little bit more of the per capita. And the second one is we do have some 2030 goals that didn't appear in so specifically with the built environment, it didn't appear in the summary. As you laid out the table with the UPC and other districts and what they're doing relative to 2030 and 2050 goals. So I'd love that to be updated because I think we've got more milestones ahead. But thank you.
So were you wanting me to address the per capita?
Yeah,
a little bit?
just your own words. I mean, I think you addressed it in the packet, but I keep coming back to what are the individual choices we each need to make in terms of this overall flight path to 2030 or 2050 goals. I feel like this board has been leaning on we have 25 permits a year that are new houses. We have 100 that are remodels. So we're doing our best on the built environment. We're doing our best on electrification. And I'm just worried and wondering why the per capita numbers relative to the rest of the state look so high. We're not the only rural resort economy. It just seems like that to me was the takeaway from the packet. That I was like, wow, that's pretty scary actually.
Yeah, I guess that really gets at the kind of intensity discussion of the type of economic activity that's occurring here. The amount of building energy being consumed and waste being consumed is not reflective of just the permanent population, full-time population here. So our per capita is very much skewed based on our visitation. So, we, in terms of the climate action plan and what we do for climate action with this information is trying to focus on what is really directly within our policy toolkit, I would say. So that's why we've taken the steps that we have so far. Maybe there are additional things that we need to consider in the future to get at that intensity question. But that would be my kind of shorter response to that.
No, and thank you, and thanks for referencing Hannah Hunt, her presentation, and sort of how the two play off one another. So I appreciate that.
Yep. All right.
All right.
I will move it along. So now we're talking about UPC, or unincorporated Pitkin County in particular. I'm not sure if you've received this information in the past showing the trend line of emissions actually being shown to go down from 2014 through 2020. The 2020 reduction was COVID, so that is a bit of a skewed number, total number as well. But prior to this report, we saw emissions going down generally. But that was pre-COVID. So we are essentially treating 2023 as a new baseline, 2023 as our post-COVID environment, in this environment of economic intensity that we have and some of these new data sources. We're just going to start looking ahead from 2023 and where do we need to get by 2050 and what's the gap. So this chart that we have is our business as usual emissions projection. So on the x-axis, it starts with the year 2023 and goes out all the way to 2050. It estimates the total emissions that we expect to see based on a number of different assumptions around like population growth and how EV market share is changing and other factors. But the different colors represent the main sectors of emissions that we have. So really the only big shift that we expect to see based on this relatively simple projection is in 2030 when we get to fully clean electricity. So building emissions are those blue segments on the bottom. We expect to see the emissions related to electricity go away. We will still have natural gas consumption occurring, so that's why it's not disappearing altogether. And so where we're trying to get to, the red line is our 2050 90% reduction goal. So you can see that on the right-hand side by 2050, if we just follow a business as usual, we have a big gap in the emissions that we need to reduce. I will say a caveat that this doesn't include our recent energy code improvements or amendments. It doesn't include those intensity aspects. From 2019 to 2023, we saw emissions go up because we may be the case where our economy is sort of more detached from like this, what you can show in this type of exercise. But regardless, we see building emissions expected to go down and the other sources not really being affected, going down slightly by 2050, but still having a lot of work to do to make up for that gap. In terms of Coal Basin being the orange slice there, in Core's presentation and Delta Brick and Climate Company, they are working on a solution to try and mitigate the methane and capture it there on site. But I think we just learned that they're going through permitting with the Forest Service. That is now seems to be in limbo, but that is a source of emissions that we at least have a plan to try and reduce that I wanted to call out here.
Greg.
Yeah, hi. Regarding fugitive emissions, so it sounds like the bulk of it is Coal Basin, but I did see a number that was shockingly high for the amount of fugitive emissions just from the transportation lines for natural gas or natural gas. Could you elaborate on that just a little bit? Because it seems shockingly high, and it seems like something we should possibly focus on.
Yeah, so there's just a kind of a baseline amount of natural gas that leaks from distribution lines. I believe in the report it only is a couple of percentage points of the total amount of fugitive emissions. How we get at that, if that's something within our control, maybe is just related to reducing the amount of natural gas being consumed. I don't know what is within county to mitigate the leakage occurring from natural gas pipelines. It's not, yeah, would be something to look at that I don't know about off the top of my head.
Yeah, I know there are people working on this. There's a technology, actually people in Aspen are associated with a technology that is trying to reduce that at the source of, so maybe closer to the wells, I'm not sure. But yeah, it's a huge problem, and it's an argument for electrification. And the other thing to think about is, as people talk about hydrogen being a solution, a hydrogen molecule is much smaller than a methane molecule. So there's a much greater possibility of hydrogen leaking. So we couldn't use the same pipelines, for instance. So it's a sticky wicket. Thanks.
Thanks, Greg. Keep going. Or...
All right, I have a couple more slides. Okay, third time you're seeing this chart, but with slightly new information again. Just to reiterate that looking at 2019 versus 2023, in 2019, building emissions were about 60% of our total. So we worked really aggressively on a lot of different policies since we got the results of that report to address building emissions. Those are emissions that are, really clearly within our direct influence through code adoption. But as we move into the future and building emissions go down and the other emissions sectors are a larger part of our total, those are probably going to require more regional solutions. They are not owned by one particular jurisdiction. There are even external factors outside of the Roaring Fork Valley that drive some of those emissions. So that is kind of the main takeaway, I think, for the county is let's keep working on building emissions because it still is about half of emissions, but we do need to we can also start thinking about really working on some of those other emission sources as well.
And if I may, as Michael's pointed out, a lot of the savings in the building emissions has been through Holy Cross and the electrical companies. Earth Day 2020, the board made some significant changes to the energy code and has made others. Reminder that there is we're seeing roughly, what year are we in? A 4 to 5 year lag of seeing some of that. So we're just now starting to close out on some of those. So what you're seeing is mostly changes in emissions from the utilities, and our hope is, within the next 3 years, you also start to see those building code changes. That lag time starts to show up a little bit more as well, and still more to go.
How are the lag times treated within these sectors? Like, I would think solid waste would be easier to capture changes from year to year.
Yeah, so the Solid Waste Center keeps great data. They do have monthly kind of reports and can show, it's something that is provided through the indicators, county indicators. Utility data or, kind of the source data that we look at, there's different level of like how responsive those could be. We follow the standard protocol for producing this report, but I think we can look at ways to just track the sort of source data more directly and maybe at a more kind of real-time way, but it is a large project.
Are there certain, like, it seems like there are certain sectors where the policy decisions can take effect more quickly?
I see.
You know what I mean? Like, I would think, like, I don't think this captures the city's like food composting yet. So like something like that might show up differently from year to year, whereas like building code, it takes 2 years to get a permit and build a building and all that.
I think you're right on. The lag on the actual data is pretty similar across all sectors. It's the lag of the policy change to impact and on the ground change is the lag that
that's kind of what I'm trying to
you're
get at.
wondering.
Like, what would we see in transportation that would change from year to year?
Right. Well, so we have the.
I'm asking.
I mean, we have the vehicle counters that are being installed, so I think we're going to start getting more kind of direct measurement or better data about transportation impacts. Maybe we don't look at this report specifically, but we can just cut to the chase and look at how much traffic are we seeing occurring around the county, and maybe based on different changes or policies that we set. So diving into the specific sector area.
Okay. Francie.
Thank you, Kelly. Thank you so much, guys. This is an amazing report. I thought it was written in such a way that it was very understandable about the difference between adding in the methane and the changes in the vehicular emission way of counting. So I thought that was clear. It's beautifully presented, and Michael, your presentation today was excellent. So just wanted to thank all of you involved with this. This is really exceptionally good work. It's one of the things that makes Pitkin County an exciting place, even in today's dreadful national picture. Pitkin County shines out. So thank you all. I really appreciated reading it, and I listened again today and appreciated it again.
Thank you, Francie. All right, well, I have just a couple more kind of in summary slides. Wanted to flash again what we thought were the key takeaways for the region and for us with this report. The total regional emissions increased by 22%. We've discussed some caveats to that number, but what was reported in 2019 compared to what is the total in 2023, 22% difference. We explain in the report some of those methodological changes. We saw cleaner electricity leading to a 2% decrease in building emissions, while we saw transportation waste emissions increase. And then lastly, transportation and waste emissions are not expected to go down significantly if we continue on a business as usual scenario. So, and with that, they're more complex and dependent on regional dynamics. So looking beyond just Pitkin County organization. Are there any remaining questions before I can leave us on next steps of what we're doing next?
I mean, I would just say, based on what Greg was bringing up, that we set a target based on an undercounted goal, and so what we're trying to achieve hasn't necessarily changed. Those emissions were there in 2019. We just didn't give them a number. So anyway, either way, it's a big gap. We've got a lot to do.
Right. Yeah. It's a little tricky. I basically think about it as we're trying to eliminate emissions altogether by 2050, so it doesn't matter what they are in any given year before 2050.
Sure.
As much.
Greg, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks, Michael, Ashley, Kara. This is important stuff, and I'm hoping what we take away from this is that we still need to use this lens to look at virtually everything that comes before us, whether it's planning projects, transportation issues, event planning, for instance. So many things contribute to this, and if we aren't asking people what they're doing about it, I think we're letting the community down. Thank you.
Thanks, Greg.
All right. Well, as far as next steps, we're rolling this report out to the public and the different kind of stakeholder groups that the county is working with. So we shared a joint press release last Friday, and we are preparing to go in front of the Airport Advisory Board in a few weeks, as well as working with the Vision 2050 team and rolling the information out for them, since so much of that project is based on GHG reduction. And as far as other upcoming items, I'm going to be bringing you the Climate Action Plan next week, so I'm excited about that. And then We also found some additional money in our grant budget to produce a county operations greenhouse gas inventory. So that is going to further set us up with our climate action work to incorporate a focus area on our emissions as an organization. And we're expecting that to be done around this spring. So thanks for your attention, and I will see you again.
Thank you for your hard work. Any final questions for Michael or Kara? Okay.
All right. Thank you very much.
Yeah, we were just a little stunning, right? Some big things to tackle.
Lots more to come.
Yeah.
And
good,
kudos
thank you.
to Michael for leading the charge.
Thank you.
All right. Well, we are scheduled to take a break, unless why don't we do future agendas for a few minutes, and then we'll take a break at 1:30. Does that work for the board? Okay. Thank you. All right. Let me open mine up.
Just a second, Kelly was having trouble getting in here.
Would you
Turn
like
on
me
your
to-
mic, I think, is what we
Yeah.
yelled from the back room.
So I just had a couple of items for the board. First, the board will recall we've partnered with our neighboring counties and really taken a leadership role in establishing the Financial Empowerment Center. There will be a ribbon cutting for that on March 13th from 4 to 6 p.m. Mortgage Commons and Glenwood Springs will be the location. And so if I believe the 13th is a Thursday. The other thing is Finance is hosting another Pi Day on it's going to be March 18th this year from 12 to 1, and there will be a pie tasting competition. So
Great.
yeah.
My favorite. Okay, I have it on my calendar to try to go to that ribbon cutting on the 13th.
Okay.
I'm hoping to get there. Yes, Francie.
Thank you, Kelly. I just want everybody to know I'm going on my second vacation since I was elected 5 years ago. And it is March 18th to the 25th. So I will miss 2 Tuesdays and a Wednesday, I think. Something like that. I don't have my calendar open right now, but anyway, I'm going to Mexico with my 2 grandchildren and my daughter. Super excited about it. And so I'll miss a few meetings. Can Zoom in once I'm there, but 2 of the meeting days are travel days. So.
I think we may not have a quorum for Tuesday, the 25th. I'm already marked out, and I think Greg had mentioned he was traveling as well.
Yeah. Greg, are you out the 25th?
That is up in the air. I thought I was, but there's a good chance I'm not going to be, but I don't have a definitive answer for you right now. Sorry.
Actually, I can help here because I'm not going till the 25th. I'm only going till the 24th. I will be back on the 25th.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
And if I could follow up on Francie's, I forgot. I'm going out to Baltimore on the 14th, next Friday, for my daughter's birthday, so I'll be out that day.
Okay. Well, good
And
for you.
then one other is I was going to go to the CAST conference on Thursday and pick up the car today, but if I still plan to go, I'm going to pick up the car tomorrow. But given the weather report, I may bail on that. So I won't be able to report back to you, but I can always watch it online if I don't go.
Okay, understandable. Is there any input on the future agenda content in the packet? I was gonna say, we were gonna schedule some time for working agreements, right?
Yeah, so I can get those on, we can get those distributed to the board and get them scheduled for a work session. We were going to use some of the time today that got freed up, but we didn't have a full board.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think all 5 should be
Yep,
there.
absolutely.
Would be great. Okay. what else? Are there other things? I feel like I'm forgetting something that we discussed. I know we raised possibly having some time with the River District in April this morning, John, if that can get added into the notes. All right. Anything else? Jeffrey, you recall? Are we making sure everything's getting in here correctly?
Martin and Woods.
Yeah, we're gonna meet with them the 18th, right? La, 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 la. Let's see. I have a question about this Bayole liquor license on the 12th. I can't remember if we were continuing that. Because I know we canceled our work, well, that's for their tent permit. But
Yeah, that was it's a separate process as quasi judicial, so I think
Yeah.
you still have to have the meeting. But my understanding was you needed to have the land use item resolved, and some of the, I think they have some code issues that they're looking to get resolved on the property before you could consider that. So we're anticipating that being continued.
Okay. Okay. I just don't know if we should.
Not to continue it.
What's that?
I thought we had decided not to continue it, but you just make a decision. Maybe I misunderstood.
Well, let's get some clarity on that, because I don't, if the hearing is going to be pushed out, it'd be better to just take it off the agenda than have people show up wanting to comment.
I agree.
So let's just get some clarity on, I'll note to get some clarity on that. See,
I thought we were going to make a decision and then still have the land use code issues need to be resolved by whatever it is.
Well, I think I'm talking about the Bayole liquor license, not Boulevard.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I thought you
No,
were
that's
talking
okay.
about
It's easy to mess them up.
Yeah.
They're kind of, they've got some similarities going on. Okay. And let's see. Yeah, Francie.
So you guys probably saw the letter from Melanie up in the Frying Pan, who was telling the constituents that they were unsure whether there was still going to be public hearing on the 12th, and they were waiting to hear from us. So it would be good if we made a decision here.
Well, everything that we're going to hear next week should be in Friday's published agenda, right? So it'll be good to clear up that question prior to Friday, for sure. Okay. Oh, and this might be a good time. Jeffrey and I had a conversation with Sam and Jeanette. They were helping us understand their process for board packets, etc. Is there a preference by you guys on when the packet is pushed out, whether Thursday afternoon or Friday or later? I know there was some preference for it to be done Friday morning to have time to either print it out or review it. And so I thought I would check in with you all.
I think that is later the better, because we often have times where we can't fit something in the packet that we wanted to, so we have to delay it. I'm fine with the way it is now. I know Patty likes to print it out on Friday morning, but I think if we could take a little pressure off staff and let them take the time they need, I'm okay with Friday afternoon.
Okay. Greg?
Same here.
Okay. So we'll shoot for Friday afternoon. Is that a compromise? Okay. Thank you. All right. Well, if there's nothing else on future agendas, feel free to always bring up if you have someone you want to invite to come present to the board or a topic that we need to carve out time for. And you can send that to me privately and we can bring it up, or we can always discuss it during these work sessions. Okay. So why don't we go ahead and we'll take our break until 1:45, and then we'll come back for our progress update on the Buttermilk concert series. Sound good? Thank you all. All right, Grassroots, see you at 1:45. Okay, welcome back everyone to the Pickens County Board of County Commissioners work session on Tuesday, March 4th. We're resuming our discussion or our work session with a discussion on a progress update on the Buttermilk Concert Series. And I'll go ahead and turn it over to staff to give us start our update. Hi.
Hi, I'm Samantha. I'm the Special Events Permit Coordinator with Suzanne Wolf. David and Daniel and Michael Goldberg are here as well. Yeah, and just to give a quick background, the county has met with Belly Up at least a month since October when the proposal to hold a concert in August was suggested and passed. And we met in early February with a bunch of different county agencies and city agencies to discuss transportation, parking, circulation, and general movement of the event. And since then, we will plan to meet once a month until the event happens. Oh, yeah.
Okay, great. And I just want to make sure, Francie, can you hear us in the room? Yeah, okay. And Greg is also online. Patty Clapper is in Washington. All right, thanks. Go ahead. give us an update. Where are we at?
Yeah. So we just discussed essentially some of the. Sure, I think I do have it open. Sorry.
I've got it close by.
We.
have to go through.
Sorry about that. We've talked about essentially safety and having open conversations with Aspen Ambulance District, as well as the fire district, and how the plan will proceed for any weather, fire, or any other unforeseen emergencies. And essentially the big setup of the whole plan, where the perimeter will be and how the security personnel that will be around the perimeter, and where they will be as guests arrive at Buttermilk and as they arrive at external parking areas, which they're choosing to do the Brush Creek parking lot and potentially lots in Snowmass, and then have shuttles running from those lots to Buttermilk and into Aspen. They're planning on having shuttles park on the south side of Wagner Park during those times and shuttle over to Buttermilk. Mainly, apparently, I'm learning more about concerts, but the ingress is not as important as the egress because everybody leaves all at the same time. So the most important part of the day or the concert would be when people leave and how to coordinate kind of a staggered exit. So there's been talk on how to best make that happen, whether there would be a little bit of an extension, like a silent concert happening while people load the buses, or food, or other techniques to keep people happy in line or not standing in line as long. And also working on how to get the shuttles out of the parking lot and the best way to get that to run. Let's see, what else have we talked about? They're also planning on using a ride share, so they have divvied up the Buttermilk parking lot into shuttles, ride share, and then also bicycles. Looking into using bicycles for transportation to bring people in and out, and they are very aware of all the logistics with biking and want to make sure everybody is safe and make sure that everybody's wearing helmets, and they will provide bike parking, and they want to make sure that nobody has any BUIs or anything like that, so they will allow them to park their bikes overnight. And anything else on the biking that would be relevant? Yeah. So it's coming along.
I just noticed on the map, is that whole parking lot saved for bike parking?
No, it's not. I'm not 100% sure, and this is not complete, but this is essentially the bare
the one that's
bones.
labeled as bike parking would actually be the ride share lot. Shuttle parking is that's where the shuttle pickup, drop off and egress will be. Biking, we are looking at doing a bike registration just so we have some type of understanding. Not that it's not going to be necessary, but it will give us some understanding on what to anticipate with that. Say that again, sorry. Oh, sorry.
Red line on.
There we
Sorry.
go.
Okay.
Good look, thank you. Working closely with Gabe at Aspen Amby and working with the sheriff department in terms of figuring out the right appropriate way to manage and message that as well too. Based off of what we find with the bike registration parking, we will have some sense of how much parking we'll need for biking. So that's going to be remains to be seen where that actually goes, and it might be in a couple of locations, but it will be down closer to in between, I would say, like where the hideout and in an Aspen are. That little area will probably be most of where we do bike parking.
Okay.
And obviously there's nuances and logistics to cover with that as well too. Not the least of which is safety. That's the most important factor to it. Aspen Amby Sheriff have been involved in every conversation that we've had in regards to this and how we best message that, how we best promote that, and how we also manage it as well too. So they're integrally involved in every step of the way and have helped us develop what we think is the best plan, which is still in progress.
Okay, other questions on bike parking right now?
Can I jump in on just a
Yes.
parking item, just because I had a quick conversation with Brian Pettit yesterday, and since you all have been talking about the new contractor to manage the buttermilk lots for the county, once they come online in April, I guess, early April, these guys are ready to get in conversation with them and sort out what they'll need to do to, basically be able to use those spaces during the concerts and whatever a contract would look like to do that. But Brian's been saying, let's wait till we get the new contractor
Sure.
on board, so you can work with them directly, so.
Will there be any vehicle parking here?
That's remains to be seen. I want to make sure that we are comfortable, we being not just us, but all the different departments as well too, are comfortable with where the plan ends up. There's no question that there's not enough parking if we did allow that. So it would be treated like a sporting event in some regards. It wouldn't be part of any specific ticket type or anything along those lines. It would be its own add-on if we even did that. I would say that very much remains to be seen. I want to make sure that the other areas are that we are all really comfortable with where those are and the amount of space that we have before we decide to devote any real estate to parking itself.
And then Suzanne, how do we treat parking relative to the folks who are able to stay for 4 days, right, is the max?
The 4 days, oh.
At Buttermilk, like if there's already cars parked there, or how is it working in terms of permits that we give for construction staging or for folks who are hiking the four-path loop?
That's why that will be the conversation with the new entity that will be managing the lot and how they're gonna sort that out in terms of people who are leasing spaces already, and if these guys are gonna wanna, lease the space, like how that works. So those logistics will be worked out once they have the right people to work with on it.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And is the shuttle gonna work the same way as like the ski shuttles now? Kind of go around that loop?
No, more robust than that. We won't use that specific loop just because only 3 buses can use it at one point. So we, with multiple transportation consultants and the ski code appointed transportation director, we've all been, and Aspen Amby and the sheriff's office have been trying to develop a plan, which will actually be in lot 3, I believe is what it's called. So we won't have any type of boneyard there, in which you do see a boneyard there for X Games where there's a lot of setup taking place. That won't be the case for us. We will do that in different areas and off-site. So that lot will be basically the loop, if you will, to figure out what the first and foremost safest and then secondly most efficient way to get people off in a timely manner.
Okay.
So the loop in which you're referring is going to end up being probably fencing and line orchestration for the actual lot itself.
Got it. Okay.
There won't be vehicle interaction and pedestrian interaction in there. It'll be completely closed
How
off.
many shuttles will you be running?
That still remains to be seen, but there will be a good amount. Dozens.
20? Okay.
Yeah, 20 to 30. Something along those lines. Understanding that there's a song and dance with it as well too, right? You don't want them just taking up space on the road and you have to figure out where to store them. So that's part of the method of us utilizing this lot as well. It's a lot of real estate. It could be perceived as you're killing a lot of real estate for just this, but there is orchestration that has to take place with it. We've also been in communication with Aspen School District about potentially staging buses there when they're not necessary to use all of them during the ingress portion of the evening. There is a little bit of conflict crossover during the Friday, but I believe teachers are out of there at 3 or 4 p.m., but this is an ongoing conversation that we've been having with them for the middle school lots. So I don't want to speak presumptively and say that that's a done deal by any stretch, but that's something that we are exploring and looking at, as well as also the lot that I mentioned on site.
Okay. Did you have something else to add on that? Okay, questions? Do you have a question?
Sure.
Go ahead.
Incident management, are we back over at Mountain Rescue?
It's incident management, and we have not developed where that's going to take place yet, but it's absolutely something that will be incident management on this.
And thank you for making Conrad Tao and Casey Musgraves appear in Aspen over the same summer. Imagine that. So I had to say that. Thank you.
Of course.
He's been very excited since the flyer came out.
Conrad Tao's only $650.
Yeah.
Okay, what else are we going to cover?
City of Aspen is out of this then? So the memo will be updated as SP Plus comes in and City of Aspen will be exiting the stage?
I mean, I
Parking
think
perspective.
they've been exited out of.
I think
Butter
they
in the
may
memo
be
still. Yeah,
exited.
it's in the
Yeah,
memo.
I mean, in theory, there's still an agreement, but yeah.
Cool. Still in the memo, sorry. And last one, any lessons learned at a Palm Tree that apply to buttermilk?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I think anytime, no matter how versed you are in this, I mean, I think I speak on behalf of all of us, we learn things at Belly Up all the time, right? So it's an ever-evolving world of music and events and everything. So absolutely, from the inception of Palm Tree and everything we've done to this year, there's definitely bits and pieces that we will take on and apply to this, and vice versa. I mean, it's a very different event as a whole. But that being said, there's absolutely a lot of great feedback that we can learn internally and you know, kind of post-mortem ourselves and post-mortem with our teams that we can apply to this and will apply to this for sure.
Do you guys have more maps as far as the setup and layout of the concert space?
I don't have that yet public. I'm happy to share that with you all. There's obviously sensitivities with that as well too. So I think let's talk in terms of what the best way of sharing that is in terms of what works for you all. But that's
well, we have to manage some neighborhood impact as far as, which, you know, it'd be nice if people knew which way the stage was.
Oh, that's easy.
Speakers are facing and those
yeah,
kind
yeah.
of
I'm sorry. I
things.
more meant
Yeah.
from like a security perspective
Yeah.
of things, right? But that, yeah, of course. I mean, I can divulge that now, and I can certainly share a more generic map that just shows the basis of that. But it's positioned facing up the hill, in between the. Is it Fanny Hill? Is it Fanny Hill? No, Fanny Hill's known as Bunny Hill. There we go. In between Panda Peak. There we go. My 2-year-old's not skiing yet, so that's why I don't know. Between Panda Peak and Summit Express, I know that one still. So it's between the two chairlifts. It's facing up the hill. I believe that's actually in my application, but I can put a more generic, easy map together, and that's more of a shareable one. And then obviously a more detailed one I can obviously share, but there's obviously conversations that we'll want to have in terms of just security sides of things.
And will In Aspen be closed off, or the Hickory House, or
They won't
usually
be.
they close off in those big events.
Yeah, they won't be completely closed off. They're going to be. We've been working with them often, I would say. Have a call actually this afternoon with home team as well too. My goal and plan is to obviously integrate them in as much as possible, give them the business as well too. They are planning to do a portion of rooms for us and for production and things like that, but the majority of them they're going to keep open for guests as well too. So we've been working with them since October, since shortly after this all was approved originally.
Are you guys coordinating with the festival? I'm just wondering if there's going to be like music overlap with their Friday night events.
With which festival? I'm sorry.
The music festival. And they usually hold Friday night, you know, orchestra in the tent.
I don't know the exact timing on theirs. We've been talking to them, and we haven't spoken to them in a couple of weeks, but we've been speaking to them somewhat. I want to say, hasn't I spoken to them 3 or 4 times? This point, 3 or 4 times at this point, and there is coordination. I don't believe that the overlap, if there is overlap, I don't believe it's great. We did explore looking at potentially having that be a shuttle pickup for us, which doesn't work, obviously, just because of the overlap on that side of things.
It's a bit of a different audience.
It's a totally different audience, but it just would be an interesting cacophony of sound if you were hearing both.
I think directionally, our sound is facing away from that, so I don't expect much noise bleeding. I can certainly I can have our production team run a sound scan on that, and I can get you data that's much more smarter than me to tell you exactly what that is, but directionally, it's facing the opposite direction.
Sure. Greg.
Yeah, hey, hey guys, nice to see you all here. I had a question also about the timing. Music festival, I think afternoon concerts start typically at 4 p.m. Often they start at, I think 6, maybe Saturday might be starting at 6 p.m. So you do have an overlap. Something definitely needs to be looked into. SoundScan, yes, definitely. I know that the Palm Festival concert stage, I believe, was, you have to remind me which direction that stage was facing. I can't remember now, but I got to tell you, I heard that concert the other night from my house in Brush Creek. You know where I live.
It faces towards us.
Okay, well, so 6 miles away, I heard the Palm Festival, all right? So I don't know which way your stage is gonna be facing, probably the mountainside, but it can bounce off the mountain, and I'm gonna be shocked if they can't hear it across, a mile away. So that's one of my concerns, and I know you'll look into it. The other one is, you're gonna end the concert at 10 PM. How many cyclists do you expect to be on the road at 10 PM?
So let me comment on the aforementioned first. I will definitely run a sound scan and get you guys the results of what that looks like and everything. I will say one of the comments that I've gotten rather frequently the last 3 years with Palm Tree, but especially this year, is in the residences that live across the river from Rio Grande Park, they can hardly hear Palm Tree. And they're as close in proximity as some as close as Clark's Market to it, but it's all about the direction of speakers and where things are pointed. So the technology is pretty advanced. If you're standing behind the stage, it sounds very different than if you're standing in front of the stage. I know this based off of comments, but I also know this because our my brother, his wife's family has a house down there, and I've talked to them about it all the time after the Palm Tree events, and they mentioned that they can't hear basically anything, and they're located one of the first houses on the river right below the recycling center. So that's just to the aforementioned point, but I will certainly do a sound scan and have that looked into and get you some more reliable data than just my voice. Secondly, that remains to be seen on the cyclists. That's part of the reason that we want to do a pre-registration so we can best prepare for that. We've talked, again, as I mentioned, AMBI and the Sheriff's Office have been involved in this from inception into what this plan is going to be developed. So based off of what we see in regards to bike registration for parking, that will give us a better sense. Obviously, that's not going to be a catch-all. We know that there'll be people who don't register for it. We'll be prepared for that, obviously, but it will give us some sense of what to actually expect and where to position staffing and where to position lights and things along those lines as well, too. There's been conversation on how to best make that as safe as we possibly can, and again, that's something that Sheriff and AMBI have been involved in from the get-go on it and continue to be. That's not developed fully at this point. It's just we're continuing to go down the path of developing it. Safety is obviously the most important thing to this. And that being said, we toyed back and forth with whether we want to have the parking. Originally, I should say, we toyed back and forth with whether we want to have the parking, encourage it, and not. There was pretty strong sentiment. Again, with Sheriff and AMBI involved, that encouraging it, messaging it, promoting it in a safe manner, in a prepared manner, is the safest way to go about it.
Thanks for that, and I appreciate your attention to that. And it occurs to me that you may be interested in lighting the path, the bike paths then, right?
Absolutely. I never want to be presumptuous in terms of where I'm allowed to put things, but with the coordination of them and at the very least right now, the conversation is at every intersection. Beyond that, I'm obviously going to defer to the safety experts on this, but that's definitely already been accounted for and will continue to be accounted for. And by lighting, it's tow lighting and things along those lines, substantial lighting, not just a makeshift light.
John, I have a question. Will the path on that side of the highway be finished yet to Truscott? Do you know construction?
I need to check on that, Kelly. I don't know what the finish time on that is.
Thanks. We're building a path that connects
I will send an email.
basically what's already a walking path from Truscott to Buttermilk.
Okay.
On that side of the road.
Hopefully it's done in time. Well, one more just small nuance, if I may, on the biking.
Through Aspen Country Inn, over the Maroon.
Aspen Country Inn, that side. Yeah,
that side.
Okay.
Yeah.
Gotcha. The integration of pedestrians and bikers is also a concern of ours. So there is plans in place on where you have them dismount the bikes, where it's walking only. Like those are all things that we're paying attention to and also trying to plan for accordingly to make sure that it's, every detail of it is as safe as we can make it with what we can put into a structure.
Okay, other elements you want to present for us to be thinking about? Or other questions? we'll cover porta potties and food trucks another day.
Oh yeah, that's easier.
Unless
than
you
the
really want to
transportation.
talk about them.
Well, we scheduled an hour for it, so I don't know how many times these guys are gonna come back and give us an update. And if, I'm of the mind that give us as much information as you have now is better. So that's what I'll say. Jeffrey, go ahead.
Did you eliminate the FAA study need at this point, or is it still on the table? See the head shaking.
That is a good question.
Memo says 7460 may be required. It's still on the table, still may be required. I'm just looking at what's the turnaround time for an FAA study, and can you meet your deadlines? And that's all that. I raise it as saying, okay, I know the clock's ticking, and it's still in the memo as unresolved. So it wasn't
Thanks
a
for
gotcha.
flagging
It was
that.
just, hey.
No, I appreciate it. Thank you. Noted. I'm happy to jump into porta potties if you want.
And we're here for, you guys have another half hour,
I
like,
do
I think
have
it's
the
to the
map.
benefit
Would
of.
it be okay to share this one, or is that one too sensitive?
Unless you're trying
I
to
would
save
say
time
just
for
because of
something.
like security reasons and everything.
Not at all. We weren't really clear on how many questions the board might have.
Sure, yeah.
And actually, just to your point about, at this point, we came back now, we were asked to come back, sort of midway through to just give you an update. I don't know that we were intending to do that again with you all, so I guess that's a question for you, if somewhere between now and the event, or, at this point, if you're comfortable with, staff doing what we do and running through with all the agencies and just making sure everybody's, all the details are met, which is what we'll be doing in order to issue the permit. Nikki?
Is there more direction that we need to give you relative to issuing the permit?
I don't think so at this point.
Okay. Greg and then Francie.
Yeah, thanks again. My questions are, one, I do think it'd be smart to come back to us. This is a huge impact event. At least that's the way I'm framing it right now. I can't imagine that it's not. I wanted to ask, so I'd love staff to come back and give us an update. One question I had was regarding the certificates of insurance and insurance. I know you're all taking care of that, but does it extend to the footprint of this event down the bike paths to town? And pedestrian and bicycle paths, you made a good point. They don't always go well together on a bike path in the dark. And I'm a little concerned that are there going to be liability issues if we have a lot of traffic at 11 o'clock at night with bicycles and pedestrians on paths all the way into town, and who's liable for that?
That's a good question in regards to insurance. I'll have to look into that. Certain things have been discussed between, actually in our last transportation meeting, to even the degree of potentially having ambassadors who kind of guide groups of people back to town, just knowing where the safe areas are, knowing where to lead, knowing where to stop. So that's something that we're exploring as well too. In regards to the insurance, I haven't started having those conversations yet, but I'm glad you flagged that, and that's something that I will absolutely make sure is part of the discussion. And in regards to meeting again, we're happy to as often as you'd like. We're in this every day. So for us, it's just talking more about it. So it doesn't bother us whatsoever. And again, like, we're always available. So if there's ever a question from anybody, like, we don't feel that there's ever a situation that we don't want somebody asking us and waiting for a meeting, if that's appropriate, of course.
Well, thanks for that, David. I do appreciate that about you guys. You guys have been very responsible in that way so far, and it's noted. Thanks.
Of course.
Thanks, Greg. Francie.
Thanks, Kelly. I actually was going to say that I don't feel the need for the Goldbergs to come back to us, because I trust all the people who are involved in planning this, and they have a pretty remarkable history of putting on safe and successful events. But if Greg does, I'm happy with that. I'm happy to see them again. I always enjoy them, so it's not a problem. I remain concerned about the number of people, but it's done. It's going to happen. So I hope everybody enjoys it and fares well.
Okay, thanks, Francie. Jeffrey, do you have other questions? I think it would be great if you guys came back in like June, like maybe, and just really gave us a thorough, like, these are all the plans, and the benefit to that is for the community as well, to like remember what to expect, or like remember like, oh, if I see, 10,000 people on the bike path that weekend, I remember why that is. So I think it'd be good to do a bit more of a thorough walkthrough than this. I would like to see the layouts. I would like to have, a clear, as you guys are obviously will be cleared on the IMT and the transportation plans and coordination with all the public safety, where the porta potties, where the food, just the better layout, a more comprehensive picture, I think would be part of my due diligence as a commissioner, having approved this to go forward, would be helpful.
Certainly happy to come back in June, and happy to show you all that beforehand as well too. That's already been developed. There's always going to be tweaks, but for the most part, we know where all of that is going to go. We have known where all of that's going to go, so happy to share that also beforehand as well too.
I think that'll be good. Jeffrey?
Good, thank you.
Okay, if there's no further questions, do we feel like we have all the right people at the table? Maybe a little more coordination with the Music Fest has been a request here today, but otherwise, it looks comprehensive.
Great.
Good? All right.
Thank you very much as always.
Best of luck.
Appreciate it.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
All right, we're gonna end early today, which suits me just fine. We have open discussion yet, and that is our last item, because we did review future agendas already.
There's an open discussion that came in from Charlotte 4 hours ago.
David Goldberg. David Goldberg.
Danny
Goldberg. Michael Goldberg. Michael Goldberg. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Cheers, see you
Thank
guys.
There's a note that came in from Greg. Potential letter to Congress, IRA and bill, about 4 hours ago. It said for open discussion, so I'm just the messenger. 9:25 a.m.
Yeah, it's amazing how many emails come in.
Scrolling
between
email.
9:25 and now. Yeah, so Greg had forwarded an email. I believe it went to the board, and it is a request to sign on to a note for support for continued funding through the U.S. Department of Agriculture's Empowering Rural America new ERA program. It is coming through as support for Holy Cross to remain eligible for funding that helps Holy Cross develop local generation sources versus purchasing outside of network. The ask, I'm trying to see who it came from.
Joan May at CC4A.
At CC4, yeah. And so it is urged to go to our congressional delegation. Greg, I hope I represented that
No, I don't see it.
properly.
9:25 a.m.
Is that not
Yeah, thanks for that, John. I appreciate you articulating it. Yeah, it's from CC4CA. Joan May is an employee of theirs, former board member, former commissioner.
And right now, I think the ask was either for commissioners to, Greg, it looked like maybe for commissioners to sign on individually, unless the board wanted us to convert this into a letter for the chair's signature.
My guess is they'd love it if the chair signed one from all of us, but I just wanted to, put it out there.
Kelly, do you want me to forward this to you? And put it
No,
on
I'm
top
looking
of
at it right now.
Oh,
Let's see.
okay. And Francie, were you able to find it?
No, but you gave me the essence of it, and I'm fine.
Yeah, I guess we would just look for direction from the board if you want us to put this into a letter, or you are all free to sign on individually. You just need to note that you're representing yourselves and not the board as a whole.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I would prefer if we sign on individually. Not that I don't support this, but I'm nervous of diluting my voice when I feel like I want to be heard on, like, hey, let's not disrupt the peaceful world order and align with authoritarian regimes, which is kind of more where I'm at. So that would just be my preference from a tactical point of view, not that I'm not in support of the mission. Is that okay?
So you're saying, Kelly, you want to sign it individually rather than having the whole board sign it?
Yeah.
Well, can we do both? Because it seems to me that if the whole board sign it carries a little more power.
You tell me. I'll sign it as chair on behalf of the board.
I think what Kelly's trying to do is preserve the voice of the whole board for high priority kind of higher priority board, higher board priorities. I apologize. That may be larger policy issues and not to dilute. So I think she's making. This was a challenge we had back in 2016. You guys are going to get a lot of these letters to sign, and it's one of the things we didn't spend time at in the retreat, like talking through what those priorities are. And so it's a little bit, I think, of us. There's two levels in this discussion right now. I think an overall strategy discussion. How do you want to use your voice as a board? And do you want to prioritize and make that more concentrated, which I think, Kelly, is what you're saying? Mm-hmm. Or do you want to sign on with a whole lot of letters that are kind of peppering the space right now, which is just a different strategy. So I think you're actually in a strategy discussion versus a content discussion.
Exactly.
Sorry, that was a long way of saying
No,
that.
you said it much more clearly than my opaque.
Thank you for that
example.
clarification. And if it's okay, Kelly, I
Please.
will respond. Are you okay with that?
Yes.
I'm not sure which would be more powerful, to have us on every objection or every support, both of those things, or just on what we might gauge as high priority. I'm not sure which gives us more clout or makes our word, our opinion, no, our point more strongly. What do other people think?
Jump in, Jeffrey.
So I think the board made it clear in the conversation with Representative Hurd at the offsite at the away day that air transportation, multimodal transportation, and the U.S. Forest Service were the top three priorities. So I would agree with Kelly that maybe this is not where we want to muddy / dilute what we've already put on the table.
Right.
Which was a strategic way of saying I'm keeping my head down.
Well, no, I mean, I think it's, if we're going to ask Congressman Hurd in a really stressful environment to go fight for rural cooperative electric funding or funding for the airport, I think aligning with our priorities makes the most sense. Again, I don't think that precludes like individual commissioners signing on in your capacity to things. Jeffrey.
I might add a fourth request to the overall prioritization, which would be, I was really taken by the social services presentation. I think they put on a pretty proud face, and I think they have some daunting challenges ahead of them. Mm-hmm. So as we think about whether it's air transportation, multimodal, U.S. Forest Service, the fourth casualty on that list, or fourth interest on that list, maybe social services in general.
That's a high one. I don't know. Have we reached? So is that okay? Folks can decide to sign on to this individually? Okay.
That's what I'm hearing.
Okay, thank you. Other open discussion?
That's all I had.
Okay. I did want to ask a few questions sort of in this space. Do we have any staff positions that are funded in whole or part through federal pass-through?
So,
I'm sorry. Did we have any staff positions that are either in whole or part funded through federal pass-through dollars?
Yeah, so So the short answer is yes. Particularly, I think in our most vulnerable areas are going to be in public health, followed by human services. We have otherwise more project funding. But we can certainly, we've kind of done a quick analysis of what we consider to be high, medium, and lower risk kind of federal funding sources. That picture, though, I just want to be clear, that's a snapshot, and that picture's changing all the time. And so we can bring that back. I think our biggest concerns right now are probably in the public health.
Yeah, I just wasn't sure if it's like, oh, this person's monthly paycheck comes from a drawdown that we take monthly, and that's not promised.
Well, and so
next
it's
month.
not,
and so we have to plan for that or otherwise.
the way we've structured is it's not necessarily tied to one single grant, but roughly 70% of public health funding is coming through grants, 30% is locally provided. And so then we got to go back and look at those programs. And what we've tried to build it so we have people working on multiple priorities. That's why it's hard to answer that question off the top.
Sure.
But will funding potentially be affected that is supporting FTEs in the county? Absolutely.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Okay, well,
and we can bring
I
that
have no
back.
doubt you'll come to us if we have to
Yes, we're
decide whether to keep people on in those fields.
Yes, we are monitoring that, and it's one of the reasons that we established the fund balances we did in the individual funds too, so that if one of those revenues drops off, we've got a little bit of time to make decisions. We may be eating into those fund balances a little bit, though.
And then along those lines, my other question was, are we engaging in planning relative to and I don't know if I'm assuming, I'll just start with my assumption. I am assuming that we will see diminished access and management to our national recreation areas all around us this summer. Just taking a guess. Not sure we're going to have everybody to staff the Maroon Bells Gate or, enough people to open difficult campground. These are sort of things that I've been wondering if they are going to come to bear and if we are planning for that or participating in any planning discussions, whether that is helping to avoid that or mitigating the impacts or any of that.
So I think there's a macro and a micro question in there. There's a impact to our overall economy kind of question in there, and then there's a micro question of are we in discussions with our partners about how we might manage those individual areas. And so starting with that question, those conversations are just starting to open up in terms of ideas. And I think right now some of our partners who are being impacted by decisions that are happening far away from us right now are still figuring out what the impacts are going to be. So we know there's going to be big impacts, to your point, Kelly, but we have not started at that micro level. At the macro level, it is really difficult to know how these changes are going to impact our tourist-based economy. I think in this first year, we may have a lot of people coming that frankly have a disappointing experience because they're unable to access some of these places. Now, a lot of the access that we're talking about, like to Maroon Bells and such, is a partnership with the locals. We're managing the buses and that sort of thing. We're not anticipating a change there, but we don't know if the bathrooms are going to be cleaned or open at the top. And there's a whole resource issue there that we have not planned around yet. Yeah. At the big
I just
picture
feel like
level,
people are making their plans, and I'm like, what is the environment under which people are making their plans right now? You know?
it is so hard
Yeah.
right now because so much change is happening so quickly. We are generally always prepared, but when we talk about impacts at the macro level as far as how we step into a downturn, if there is a downturn, about how we would approach that depending on what the circumstances are. So we saw that during COVID. We pivoted quickly. We've pivoted quickly during recessionary times to either hold on spending or come to you with a projection that says, hey, we think this is only going to go this long, and so this is where so we'll do that work.
Well, or alternatively, we see more pressure on our resources, you know,
and it could
because
be
of
an expense
closures
side
around us, right?
Yeah, so I will say we've had some outreach from our federal partners to start talking about ideas along what you're talking about, but we have not had those specific conversations or come up with specific recommendations for the board yet.
Okay, thank you. Greg?
Yeah, thanks for this, John. My inclination would be to start preparing now regarding, looking at the budget seriously with each department so they understand maybe now's not the time to be looking at ways to expand the hires and, operations. I'm really concerned about this. I'd like to be as far ahead of it as we can possibly be, but it's not looking good to me. The other thing I was going to say is I'd like it if we can learn about just how much authority do we have locally, perhaps invested with the board or with the sheriff to actually make decisions regarding closures or deputizing people, putting rangers on the ground in the forest areas where we need them. Somebody brought up the question, just how much authority locally do we actually have if we need to supplement what the federal people are not doing? And someone else suggested that the sheriff may actually have a lot more power in that regard than anyone else in the community, and that we should be investigating this. And I don't know anything more about it, but I think it's worth examining so we understand what our options are. If they're not here to clean the toilets, are we going to have to close the road? As you suggest, we do control the road to the Maroon Bells. Are we going to have to shut down campgrounds? How is this going to work, and do we have the authority to do that? And if we don't know, I guess we should find out.
Yeah.
Thanks.
And Greg, that's certainly a question we can bring back with our attorneys. I would note that one of the reasons we're in the funding partnership we were with the Forest Service to hire rangers was exactly this question of authority. It was very clear that as a Forest Service employee, the rangers had enforcement capability, which was in question with our own staff. And so we can look into that further, but I think our, when we've looked into this in the past, that's part of the reason we came to the conclusion that a funding relationship with the Forest Service was going to be the most beneficial path in order to achieve our enforcement goals. Obviously, those positions have been caught up in the cuts that have recently happened, and we're still hopeful those can come back.
So if I could ask Kelly, the last question is just and this is a rhetorical question, but in a vacuum, when the Forest Service simply isn't there, and the BLM managers and the other federal managers simply aren't there, what can be expected of local law enforcement and authorities to step in to fill that void? And how bold would we have to be in order to assume that authority?
Well, it'll go back to the resource question that you started with too, Greg. And as many people have been laid off from the White River National Forest as we have deputies at this point. Sorry to end on a
Well,
bad
no,
note.
I mean, we have to talk about this stuff, honestly. Other items for open discussion? All right,
Well,
sorry, go
I was gonna just say that, this weather has been amazing for cabbing. I'm really enjoying it, and I hope that, as the Forest Service deals with its issues, that we're not gonna have impacted grazing permits, and those kinds of impacts. I mean, I know we're gonna have impacts everywhere, but I'm hoping that one will stay okay.
How many cows are you gonna have? How many
What?
how many babies?
Well, let's see, I think we must be up to about 20-something. So we're moving slowly, which is fine.
How many are you gonna have?
Well, hopefully 308.
Oh my God, that's a lot of baby cows. All right.
It goes well. We did have 2 sets of twins in one day, which was extraordinary. That will not happen again, I hope. That's a lot to deal with. But counting the twins, I guess we could have 310.
Yeah. Cool. All right. Well, on that note, everyone loves baby cows. So, we will adjourn for the day and we'll be back next Tuesday. Thank you all. Thanks, Grassroots.
Thank you.
Thank you all.